In this chapter from The Betrothed, Alessandro Manzoni leads us into a moonlit escape where exile begins and the heart speaks its last goodbye. Welcome to Chapter Breaks. Short literary escapes, classic audio pills for your commute, bedtime unwind, or a break anytime. At Chapter Breaks, we carefully select and curate iconic passages from classic novels, scenes that are powerful, memorable, reflective, and a joy to listen to. Whether it's a timeless first chapter, a dramatic turning point, or a magical moment, each episode offers you the essence of great literature, one short escape at a time. This chapter break is The Betrothed by Alessandro Manzoni, 1827. Extract from Chapter 8. Farewell Mountains. Moonlight on still water, and a goodbye that breaks the heart. A brief introduction before listening to the chapter. In this unforgettable passage from Chapter 8, Lucia and her companions flee in silence, crossing the lake under a cold, steady moon. The oars dip and glimmer. The shore recedes. The world behind them grows distant and unreal. In the hush of the night, familiar villages and rooftops fall into shadow, and the presence of Don Rodrigo's palace looms like a threat over sleeping lives. And then the moment turns inward. Lucia looks back toward the mountains that have shaped her whole existence, the torrents, the paths, the cottage, the church, and grief rises into one of the most famous farewells in Italian literature, a lament for home, for safety, for the life that should have been. This is Manzoni at his most poetic. Exile made personal, landscape turned into memory, and a simple departure transformed into a hymn of longing. We are about to step into this moonlit crossing, where leaving is not just movement, but destiny. Now let's open the page together. Your chapter break begins now. Chapter 8. Long before this, however, the alarm had been given to other personages of our story, the Bravos in one place, and Agnes and Perpetua in another. It is necessary to relate briefly how the former had been occupied since we last took leave of them, those at the old house and those at the inn. The latter, when they ascertained that the inhabitants of the village had retired to rest, and that the road was clear, went to the cottage of Lucy, and found that a perfect stillness reigned within. They then returned to the old house to give in their report to Signor Griso. He immediately put on a slouched hat with a pilgrim's habit and staff, saying, "Let us act as becometh soldiers, cautious, quiet, and attentive to orders." Then, leading the way, he, with his company, arrived at the cottage by a route different from that taken by our poor cottagers. Griso kept the band a few steps off, went forward alone to explore, and seeing all deserted and quiet on the outside, he beckoned to two of them, ordered them to mount very carefully and quietly the wall which enclosed the courtyard, and to conceal themselves on the other side behind a thick fig tree which he had observed in the morning. That being done, he knocked gently at the door, with the intention to call himself a pilgrim, who had wandered from his way, and request shelter until the morning. No answer. He knocked again, louder, not a sound. He then called a third robber, made him also descend into the yard, with orders to unfasten the bolt on the inside so that they might have free entrance. All was performed with the utmost caution and the most complete success. Griso then called the rest, and made some of them conceal themselves by the side of those behind the fig tree. He then opened the door very softly, placed 2 sentinels on the inside of it, and advanced to the lower chamber. He knocked. He waited, and well might wait. He raised the latch. No one from within said, "Who is there?" Nothing could go on better. He then called the robbers from the fig tree, and with them entered the room where he had in the morning so villainously received the loaf of bread. He drew out his flint, tinderbox, and matches, and striking a light, proceeded to the inner chamber. It was empty. He returned to the stairs and listened. Solitude and silence. He left 2 to keep watch below, and with the others carefully ascended the stairs, cursing in his heart the creaking of the steps. He reached the summit, pushed softly open the door of the first room, and listened if anyone breathed or moved. No one. He advanced, shading his face with the lamp, and perceived a bed. It was made and perfectly smooth, with the covering arranged in order on the bolster. He shrugged his shoulders, and returning to the company, made a sign to them that he was going into the other room and that they should remain quietly behind. He did so, and had the same success. All deserted and quiet. "What the devil's this?" said he aloud. "Some traitorous dog has played the spy." They then searched with less ceremony the rest of the house, putting everything out of its place. Meanwhile, those at the doorway heard a light step approaching in the street. They kept very quiet, thinking it would pass on. But behold, it stopped exactly in front of the cottage. It was Menico, who had come in haste from the convent to warn Agnes and her daughter to escape from the house and take refuge there, because the because is already known. He was surprised to find the door unbolted, and entering with a vague sentiment of alarm, found himself seized by two ruffians, who said in a menacing tone, "Hush, be quiet, or you die." He uttered a cry, at which one struck him a blow on the mouth. The other placed his hand on his sword to inspire him with fear. The boy trembled like a leaf, and did not attempt to stir, but all at once was heard the first sound of the bell, and immediately after a thundering peal burst forth. "The wicked are always cowards," says a Milanese proverb. Alarmed at the sound, the bravos let go in haste the arms of Menico, and fled away hastily to the old house, to join the main body of their comrades. Menico, finding himself free, also fled, by the way of the fields, towards the belfry, naturally supposing he would find someone there. As to the other villains above stairs, the terrible sound made the same impression on them. Amazed and perplexed, they hit one against the other, in striving to find the nearest way to the door. Nevertheless, they were brave, and accustomed to confront any known danger. But here was something unusual, an undetermined peril, and they became panic-struck. It now required all the superiority of Griso to keep them together, so that there should be a retreat and not a flight. He succeeded, however, in assembling them in the middle of the courtyard. "Halt! Halt!" cried he. "Pistols in hand, knives ready, all in order, and then we will march. Cowards, for shame! Fall behind me and keep together." Reduced to order, they followed him in silence. We will leave them, in order to give an account of Agnes and Perpetua, whom we left at the end of the little lane, engaged in conversation. Agnes had managed to draw the latter off to some distance, by dint of appearing to give great heed to her story, which she urged on by an occasional, "Certainly, now I comprehend, that is plain, and then, and he, and you." In the midst of an important part of her narrative, the deep silence of the night was broken by the cry of Don Abbondio for help. "Mercy, what is the matter?" cried Perpetua, and prepared to run. "What is the matter? What is the matter?" cried Agnes, holding her by the gown. "Mercy, did you not hear?" replied she, struggling to get free. "What is the matter? What is the matter?" repeated Agnes, holding her firmly by the arm. "Devil of a woman!" exclaimed Perpetua, still struggling. Then was heard at a distance the light scream of Menico. "Mercy!" cried Agnes also, and they both ran at full speed. The sound of the bell, which now succeeded, spurred them on. Perpetua arrived first, and behold, at the door, Tony, Gervase, Renzo and Lucy, who had found the stairs, and at the terrible sound of the bell, were flying to some place of safety. "What is the matter? What is the matter?" demanded Perpetua out of breath of the brothers. They answered her with a violent push and fled away. "And you? What are you here for?" said she then to Renzo and Lucy. They made no reply. She then ascended the stairs in haste to seek her master. The two lovers, still lovers, stood before Agnes, who, alarmed and grieved, said, "Ah, you are here! How has it gone? Why did the bell ring?" "Home, home," said Renzo, "before the people gather." But Menico now appeared running to meet them. He was out of breath and hardly able to cry out. Back! Back! By the way of the convent, there is the devil at the house," continued he, panting. "I saw him, I did. He was going to kill me. The Father Christopher says you must come quickly. I saw him, I did. I'm glad I found you all here. I will tell you all when we are safe off." Renzo, who was the most self-possessed of the party, thought it best to follow his advice. "Let us follow him," said he to the females. They silently obeyed, and the little company moved on. They hastily crossed the churchyard, passing through a private street into the fields. They were not many paces distant before the people began to collect, each one asking of his neighbour what was the matter, and no one being able to answer the question. The first that arrived ran to the door of the church. It was fastened. They then looked through a little window into the belfry and demanded the cause of the alarm. When Ambrose heard a known voice and knew by the hum that there was an assemblage of people without, he hastily slipped on that part of his dress which he had carried under his arm and opened the church door. "What is all this tumult? What is the matter? Where is it? Where is it? Do you not know? Why, in the curate's house. Run, run!" They rushed in a crowd thither, looked, listened. All was quiet. The street door was fastened, not a window open, not a sound within. "Who is within there? Holla, holla! Signor Curate, Signor Curate!" Don Abbondio, who as soon as he was relieved by the flight of the invaders, had retired from the window and closed it, was now quarrelling with Perpetua for leaving him to bear the brunt of the battle alone. When he heard himself called by name by the people outside, he repented of the rashness which had produced this undesired result. "What has happened? Who are they? Where are they? What have they done to you?" cried 100 voices at a time. "There is no one here now. I am much obliged to you. Return to your houses." "But who has been here? Where have they gone? What has happened?" Bad people, who wander about in the night. But they have all fled. Return to your houses. I thank you for your kindness." So saying, he retired and shut the window. There was a general murmur of disappointment through the crowd. Some laughed, some swore, some shrugged up their shoulders and went home. But at this moment a person came running towards them, panting and breathless. He lived at the house opposite to the cottage of Lucy, and had witnessed from the window the alarm of the bravos when Griso endeavoured to collect them in the courtyard. When he recovered breath, he cried, "What do you do here, friends? The devil is not here. He is down at the house of Agnes Mondella. Armed people are in it. It seems they wish to murder a pilgrim, but who knows what the devil it is." "What? What?" And then began a tumultuous conversation. "Let us go. How many are there? How many are we? Who are they? The constable. The constable." "I am here," replied the constable from the midst of the crowd. "I am here, but you must assist me. You must obey. Quick! Where is the sexton? To the bell, to the bell, quick! Someone run to Lecco to ask for succour. Come this way." The tumult was great, and as they were about to depart for the cottage of Agnes, another messenger came flying and exclaimed, "Run, friends! Robbers who are carrying off a pilgrim. They are already out of the village. On, this way." In obedience to this command, they moved in a mass, without waiting the orders of their leader, towards the cottage of Lucy. While the army advances, many of those at the head of the column slacken their pace, not unwilling to leave the post of honour to their more adventurous friends in the rear. The confused multitude at length reached the scene of action. The traces of recent invasion were manifest, the door open, the bolts loosened, but the invaders, where were they? They entered the court, advanced into the house and called loudly, "Agnes! Lucy! Pilgrim! Where is the pilgrim? Did Stefano dream that he saw him? No, Carl Andrea saw him also. Hello, pilgrim! Agnes! Lucy! No reply! They have killed them! They have killed them!" There was then a proposition to follow the murderers, which would have been acceded to had not a voice from the crowd cried out that Agnes and Lucy were in safety in some house. Satisfied with this, they soon dispersed to their homes, to relate to their wives that which had happened. The next day, however, the constable being in his field, and, with his foot resting on his spade, meditating on the mysteries of the past night, was accosted by two men, much resembling in their appearance those whom Don Abbondio had encountered a few days before. They very unceremoniously forbade him to make a deposition of the events of the night before the magistrate, and, if questioned by any of the gossips of the villagers, to maintain a perfect silence on pain of death. Our fugitives for a while continued their flight, rapidly and silently, utterly overwhelmed by the fatigue of their flight, by their late anxiety, by vexation and disappointment at their failure, and a confused apprehension of some future danger. As the sound of the bell died away on the ear, they slackened their pace. Agnes, gathering breath and courage, first broke the silence by asking Renzo what had been done at the curate's. He related briefly his melancholy story. "And who," said she to Menico, "was the devil in the house? What did you mean by that?" The boy narrated that of which he had been an eyewitness, and which imparted a mingled feeling of alarm and gratitude to the minds of his auditors. Alarm at the obstinacy of Don Roderick in pursuing his purpose, and gratitude that they had thus escaped his snares. They caressed affectionately the boy who had been placed in so great danger on their account. Renzo gave him a piece of money in addition to the new coin already promised, and desired him to say nothing of the message given him by Father Christopher. "Now, return home," said Agnes, "because thy family will be anxious about thee. You have been a good boy. Go home, and pray the Lord that we may soon meet again." The boy obeyed, and our travellers advanced in silence. Lucy kept close to her mother, dexterously but gently declining the arm of her lover. She felt abashed, even in the midst of all this confusion, at having been so long and so familiarly alone with him, while expecting that a few moments longer would have seen her his wife. But this dream had vanished, and she felt most sensitively the apparent indelicacy of their situation. They at length reached the open space before the church of the convent. Renzo advanced towards the door and pushed it gently. It opened, and they beheld, by the light of the moon, which then fell upon his pallid face and silvery beard, the form of Father Christopher, who was there in anxious expectation of their arrival. "God be thanked," said he, as they entered. By his side stood a capuchin, whose office was that of sexton to the church, whom he had persuaded to leave the door half open and to watch with him. He had been very unwilling to submit to this inconvenient and dangerous condescension, which it required all the authority of the Holy Father to overcome. But perceiving who the company were, he could endure no longer. Taking the father aside, he whispered to him, "But Father, at night, in the church, with women, shut. The rules, but Father." "Omnia munda mundis," replied he, turning meekly to Friar Fazio and forgetting that he did not understand Latin. But this forgetfulness was exactly the most fortunate thing in the world. If the father had produced arguments, Friar Fazio would not have failed to oppose them, but these mysterious words, he concluded, must contain a solution of all his doubts. He acquiesced, saying, "Very well, you know more than I do." Father Christopher then turned to our little company, who were standing in suspense by the light of a lamp which was flickering before the altar. "Children," said he, "thank the Lord, who has preserved you from great peril. Perhaps at this moment—" And he entered into an explanation of the reasons which had induced him to send for them to the convent, little suspecting that they knew more than he did, and supposing that Menico had found them tranquil at their home before the arrival of the robbers. No one undeceived him, not even Lucy, although suffering the keenest anguish at practicing dissimulation with such a man. But it was a night of confusion and duplicity. "Now," continued he, "you perceive, my children, that this country is no longer safe for you. It is your country, I know. You were born here. You have wronged no one. But such is the will of God. It is a trial, children. Support it with patience, with faith, without murmuring, and be assured there will come a day in which you will see the wisdom of all that now befalls you. I have procured you a refuge for a season, and I hope you will soon be able to return safely to your home. At all events, God will provide, and I, his minister, will faithfully exert myself to serve you, my poor persecuted children. You, continued he, turning to the females, can remain at... There you will be beyond danger, and yet not far from home. Go to our convent in that place. Ask for the superior. Give him this letter. He will be to you another Friar Christopher. And thou, my Renzo, thou must place thyself in safety from the impetuosity of others and your own. Carry this letter to Father Bonaventura of Lodi, in our convent at the eastern gate of Milan. He will be to you a father, will advise you, and find you work until you can return to live here tranquilly. Now, go to the border of the lake, near the mouth of the Bione, a stream a short distance from the convent. You will see there a small boat fastened. You must say, "A boat." You will be asked for whom. Answer, St. Francis. The boatman will receive you, will take you to the other side, where you will find a carriage, which will conduct you to... If anyone should ask how Father Christopher came to have at his disposal such means of transport by land and by water, he would show little knowledge of the power possessed by a Capuchin who held the reputation of a saint. The charge of the houses remained to be thought of. The father received the keys of them. Agnes, on consigning hers, thought with a sigh that there was no need of keys. The house was open, the devil had been there, and it was doubtful if there remained anything to be cared for. Before you go, said the father, let us pray together to the Lord that he may be with you in this journey, and always, and above all, that he may give you strength to submit cheerfully to that which he has ordained. So saying, he knelt down. All did the same. Having prayed a few moments in silence, he pronounced with a low but distinct voice the following words: We pray thee also for the wretched man who has brought us to this state. We should be unworthy of thy mercy if we did not earnestly solicit it for him. He has most need of it. We, in our sorrow, have the consolation of trusting in thee. We can still offer thee our supplications with thankfulness. But he is an enemy to thee. O wretched man! He dares to strive against thee. Have pity on him, O Lord. Touch his heart, soften his rebellious will, and bestow on him all the good we would desire for ourselves. Rising hastily, he then said, Away, my children, there is no time to lose. God will go with you. His angel protect you. Away. They kept silence from emotion, and as they departed, the father added, My heart tells me we shall soon meet again. Without waiting for a reply, he retired. The travellers pursued their way to the appointed spot, found the boat, gave and received the watchword, and entered into it. The boatman made silently for the opposite shore. There was not a breath of wind. The lake lay polished and smooth in the moonlight, agitated only by the dipping of the oars, which quivered in its gleam. The waves breaking on the sands of the shore were heard deadly and slowly at a distance, mingled with the rippling of the waters between the pillars of the bridge. The silent passengers cast a melancholy look behind at the mountains and the landscape, illumined by the moon, and varied by multitudes of shadows. They discerned villages, houses, cottages, the palace of Don Roderick, raised above the huts that crowded the base of the promontory, like a savage prowling in the dark over his slumbering prey. Lucy beheld it, and shuddered, then cast a glance beyond the declivity, towards her own little home, and beheld the top of the fig tree which towered in the courtyard. Moved at the sight, she buried her face in her hands and wept in silence. Farewell, ye mountains, source of waters. Farewell to your varied summits, familiar as the faces of friends. Ye torrents, whose voices have been heard from infancy. Farewell, how melancholy the destiny of one who, bred up amid your scenes, bids you farewell. If voluntarily departing with the hope of future gain at this moment, the dream of wealth loses its attraction, his resolution falters, and he would fain remain with you, were it not for the hope of benefiting you by his prosperity. The more he advances into the level country, the more his view becomes wearied with its uniform extent. The air appears heavy and lifeless. He proceeds sorrowfully and thoughtfully into the tumultuous city, Houses crowded against houses, street uniting with street, appears to deprive him of the power to breathe. And in front of edifices admired by strangers, he stops to recall, with restless desire, the image of the field and the cottage which had long been the object of his wishes, and which, on his return to his mountains, he will make his own, should he acquire the wealth of which he is in pursuit. But how much more sorrowful the moment of separation to him, who, having never sent a transient wish beyond the mountains, feels that they comprise the limit of his earthly hopes, and yet is driven from them by an adverse fate, who is compelled to quit them to go into a foreign land, with scarcely a hope of return. Then he breaks forth into mournful exclamations. "Farewell, native cottage, where many a time and oft I have listened with eager ear to distinguish amidst the rumour of footsteps the well-known sound of those long expected and anxiously desired. Farewell, ye scenes, where I had hoped to pass, tranquil and content, the remnant of my days. Farewell, thou sanctuary of God, where my soul has been filled with admiring thoughts of him, and my voice has united with others to sing his praise. Farewell. He, whom I worshipped within your walls, is not confined to temples made with hands. Heaven is his dwelling place, and the earth his footstool. He watches over his children, and, if he chastises them, it is in love, to prepare them for higher and holier enjoyments. Of such a nature, if not precisely the same, were the reflections of Lucy and her companions, as the bark carried them to the right bank of the Adda.